Hi everybody, my name is Lilian Riad-Allen. I completed my master's degree at the University of Toronto with a focus area on neurosciences. We're going to talk a little bit about what that is exactly, but to give you a sneak peek into what my area of specialization is, my graduate training was focused on the interaction in an animal model with animals experiencing social distress and their propensity for the development of addictions. So neuroscience is the study of the brain and the central nervous system and the interaction between them. It's a really interesting field of study because it combines anatomy, physiology, psychology, and all kinds of other factors, including things like mathematic predictive models, into how we study and then interpret that. Because I'm a behavioral neuroscientist, specifically that extension of it is looking at how our physiology, our chemistry interacts with how our brain is actually structured and how that affects our behavior. So research is conducted in a number of different ways, but the gold standard in any kind of research that you do is a randomized control trial. In the context of meditation, what that looks like is you would have somebody receiving a specific treatment or therapy and then compare that against something like mindfulness-based trainings. How that's actually measured and how we know that meditation affects not just how we feel about things, but also physical structures within our body is through things like functional magnetic resonance imaging and other types of imaging practices. So the really cool thing is that we can measure how our behavior is affected, how our breathing and kind of central nervous system activation is affected, but also how our brains are actually changing in response. So a concept that exists in neuroscience is called neural plasticity. And neural plasticity really tells us that the brain is an ever-changing and ever-moldable organ of our body. So unlike other systems within our bodies, our hearts, which are quite anatomically fixed, our brains are always changing, and they're changing based on our experiences and our exposures. So through repeated exposure to something like mindfulness meditation, it allows us to actually change the way our brain works, which again, if we think about how research into neuroscience typically occurs, it's through imaging. And so one of the ways that neuroscientists and clinicians know that practices like this are working is by actually evaluating and measuring those changes as they light up on things like functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI. So I'm going to try to answer this by giving a really concrete example that I think everybody in the room will be able to relate to. If you've ever had the experience where something has happened and you're finding that you're just ruminating and you're thinking about it over and over again and you can't separate your mind from it, you might also notice that you're feeling certain sensations in your body or having certain bodily experiences. And the reality is, we know that when people are looking at strategies for managing some of those feelings or anxieties, they can often go to thought-based or cognitive behavioral-based trainings and therapies. And that's helpful and adaptive for many processes, but in some situations it's not the correct one because it can actually lead to increases in cognitive reappraisals and actually more rumination and thinking. So sometimes a good place to start is actually in creating a bit of a space between what you are feeling physically and what you are cognitively processing. And one way to do that is through mindfulness meditation. Reason being because when you practice mindfulness, it allows you to separate your thoughts and allow you to feel the sensations happening from your body. What's actually happening in your brain, which is the really cool part and what I love most about neuroscience, is that there's actually pathways being developed and built within your brain that allow you to almost develop a regular and standardized separation of those two. And through regular practice of meditation, those bridges just get reinforced. And so when we have those feelings in our bodies and the sensation, we can allow ourselves to connect to them and how it's affecting us without necessarily feeding into that rumination thought spiral. Absolutely. The evidence base is strong and supportive that mindfulness is a practice that everybody should be considering as part of their day-to-day. And if you are in the care of a licensed practitioner, it's always good to have that conversation with them as well as part of your complete care. And if not, if you're just looking for practices that support your resilience and well-being, the evidence is quite clear that even short and brief meditations every day can be helpful. And it's always good to find little things to power charge your resilience. So mindfulness meditation is a very specific thing, and there's a lot of app-based programs or meditation studios that you can go to access proper mindfulness meditation. But there's also a lot of different ways to practice mindfulness in your day-to-day. For example, mindful eating, where you are attending to what it is that's in front of you, paying attention to the flavors, how they hit your mouth, how they feel when you're absorbing them. And it's really just about slowing down the pace of life and enjoying the moment you're in. I know that I can get a little bit excited about things sometimes, and when I'm feeling my energy start to rush, or if I'm in a high stress situation, then it's also about connecting to the tone and pace of my breathing, the tone and pace of my speech, and really interestingly watching how that affects those around me, especially my partner when we are in an argument.